Great. Well, we will now reconvene to our regular session at 6:21 p.m. And we will start out with the, let's see, with the flag salute. The flags are here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I'd like to announce that the board meeting tonight is being recorded and there are no other announcements besides that. And we'll start with our Board of Trustees report. So Trustee Bacali, you want to start?
Sure. Thank you, President Coop. It's been very busy since our last board meeting. I had a chance to attend 3 brown bag lunches at Nesbitt, Fox, and Sandpiper schools. And I just want to thank all of the teachers and staff who joined us. At each of those schools, we had a packed lunchroom, which was great because otherwise it would have been, the 3 of us talking to each other for an hour and a half. So that was nice. And just a couple of things that we learned from the brown bags. We heard that students and teachers are very happy to be back in person schooling. That was a universal feeling. We've heard that students are coping well with the transition back to in person. Though we did hear that some younger students are having, expected some issues about relearning or learning for the first time certain skills, such as taking turns, playing well with each other again, and then some basics of handwriting and things like that. We also heard requests for some support of special education students, more support, as the number of IEPs in our district seems to have increased in certain cohorts. So that was a concern we heard. I also had a chance, I guess it was last night. It feels like all the days are running together, but it was last night, the Nesbitt PTA meeting on Zoom, which also had a fantastic attendance. I couldn't believe how many people were attending, and a real sense of community and pride in the school, which starts right from the top, from principal and leadership, whom we will hear from tonight. But I want to thank Superintendent DeGuara and CBO Bow for giving a really comprehensive presentation about our district's budget situation. I think it was very well received. There was a lot of positive feedback and actually offers for help already to spread the word about the district's budget situation. So we're going to have more budget town halls coming up at various school PTA meetings in the next couple of weeks. So I just encourage everybody, if you get a chance, they're all going to be on Zoom, easily accessible. So that's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Trustee Bacali. Trustee Blasi?
Mine is pretty short. Most of the sessions that I signed up for are coming up for both the brown bag lunches and the PTA meetings. So I'm looking forward to those sessions.
Great. Thank you. And Trustee Howard?
They both 2 brown bags this week and PTA meeting, and I say the best part is just seeing the community start to come back together. The same sort of themes, kids having some trouble getting back into the socialization of school, and a lot of thankfulness about hiring up counselors. And some requests for, APs, that sort of thing. Can't mention mine. But the other thing that came up was, some challenges around assessments and working in the assessments towards the regular lessons and also balancing that with the normalization of the classroom and behaviors expected within the classroom. So kids are maybe not so independent at this point, and that's a little bit of a challenge. I will say that I did get to do one of my most favorite things, which was go to just a PTA get together this morning, and you forget how much you miss everybody, how good it is to see everybody in person, and how much you miss the community of just having parents that you can yuck up about whatever, you know. It really is nice to see us coming back together again. And I really look forward to having volunteers be back in the classroom and on campus starting next week, which times so well with the Halloween gathering starting. Even though there will still be a little bit of limits on those, it's good to know that we're starting to organize towards normalcy again. That's all I got.
Thank you, Trustee Howard. Trustee Limebach?
Well, I think I had prepared some comments, but it's just going to be a repeat. of everyone else. So brown bags are great. PTA meetings are great. Thanks for Dan and Rui for presenting the budget and all the details there. It was a great presentation, and hopefully we'll have similar or greater participation in other PTA meetings for parents to hear what you have to say about that. One thing I want to say about one of the brown bags I was at, hearing teachers and their innovations and everything is really amazing. I love hearing these stories firsthand in the kind of casual setting like this for the brown bag lunches. I have to give thanks to School Force for giving the innovation grants, which helped teachers shared stories about, I use the School Force money for this and that. So I got to give plugs to School Force. And then also another interesting thing was on teacher collaboration up the hill here at Fox. The teachers got together and they came up with some ideas and say, hey, well, I specialize a lot in math, you specialize in writing, and you specialize in something else. And instead of trying to put that, each teacher do these three things on their own, they said, well, why don't we switch the kids around? All the kids are coming to my class for math and doing your class for writing and so forth. And it was just the spirit and of the teachers getting together and saying, hey, let's help each other out. And that was just a really warming story to hear them do that and to be able to specialize for each of these subjects and help each other out, and the kids get a better education and learning experience. I'd like to see ideas like this, shared among the other, within the school and among the other sites. So I'd recommend anything we can do to kind of share those inspirational stories that we hear in those brown bags district. But that's just one story of many that heard these brown bag lunches, and it's always a good experience. So, and back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So for myself, I just wanted to start by saying I'm always very impressed at what the PTAs are doing to promote community within their schools. I had a chance to go to the Sandpiper community bike ride when the weather was still nice before all the rain hit. It was a great turnout of, I think, probably close to 100 families. I mean, it was a lot of people. And so it was almost like having traffic control, letting groups of people go at a time. And in fact, there was a police presence to monitor the traffic. So there were that many people, it looked like a race. The bad news was that I skidded off the edge of a bike path on a turn and landed on top of my bike and broke a few ribs there. So, what? Yes, I did. But I managed to dust myself off, made it back to the school, had my popsicle, made it home and figured things out later. So, but it was very memorable. But it was great seeing everyone out and about. And
the district's not insured for that kind of activity.
I was just going a little too fast. I felt like I was on a BMX or something. But it was great to follow that up with the Belmont Water Dog Run. I had signed up, so I didn't run. I didn't run, I just walked. So walking was okay. And it was really great to see people I hadn't seen in almost 2 years, and everyone gathered around wearing their Belmont Water Dog t-shirts and really getting excited with families doing things together. And I think it's a reminder that we're getting closer to normalcy. So even though everyone was wearing masks, we're actually doing things that we used to do. So that was really great. I had to leave before Superintendent DeBora's MC of the kids fun run. So hopefully you give us a little summary. So I look forward to hearing about that experience. I had a chance to go to the School Force Board meeting, and just a quick reminder that the educational commitment campaign is ending on October 31st. And the goal is 50% participation. So they really are focusing on participation rates. And this is really the final run to try and get those rates up. Because with participation, the donations amounts will follow, right? And so really the idea is getting everyone engaged and participating. And for those of you who are wondering when the invites for the Save the Music Festival will be sent out, the event has been pushed out to April 24th. I think there were some people who were going like, what happened? Are we supposed to have save the dates? Or, but it's pushed out. And really it's likely to be safer to hold large in-person events like that in the spring. And there's also more time for students to learn their instruments and get the music under their belt, since last year was a very different year. And then also reading power got pulled in from January to November during the parent-teacher conferences. So that'll give the kids more time to read and fundraise, right? Give them something to do. And then the last thing was the Monday was a very busy time because I had two events in one day. One was an APISMA event. So that's the API School Board Members Association. And that was on navigating the political landscape of ethnic studies. So, you know, the high school requirement has been approved now and signed by Governor Gavin Newsom. So there's a lot of interest in how to incorporate ethnic studies in our schools, but then at the same time, there's a lot of pushback by certain groups as it relates to CRT. So it was an opportunity to kind of go through what's going on with that whole situation. If opposition arises because of CRT, you know, what are some things that we could respond with and that type of thing, and understanding where districts were in their journey to adopting ethnic studies. And it was all over the map. Like some people already have a high school requirement. Some people already have an elective, and then others are just talking about it, and some haven't even started talking about it. So everyone was all over the place. And you know, the question is, how does that apply to K-8 school districts? It's unlikely that they would create an elective or a separate course. So then there's also the option of how do we integrate some of those perspectives into our everyday curriculum. So that was kind of the discussion around that stuff. And then that same night, there was a San Mateo County School Board Association meeting, Governing in a Time of Chaos, which included things like the CRT issues, as well as masking and other hot topics, and how to really retain control of the meeting and make sure that we lead with our governance processes, you know. So what are the clear processes of civil discourse at a board meeting, and following up with that. I think Trustee Leinbach was there as well, right? It was definitely very useful for presidents, because presidents have a very important role to play in keeping the meeting under control. And I know Trustee Leinbach is waiting in the wings. It was good training for him as well. And that's my update. All right. Let's see. Next up is our superintendent's report.
Great. And I chuckle because you guys say everybody steals your thunder if you go early. Definitely, we've had a lot of overlap the last couple of weeks. I will just say here to the brown bags. It's always great to connect with staff, to hear stories, to hear challenges, to hear successes, and there's a lot of all of them. So really busy time, but really great to connect with all of our staffs. And I share a chuckle. Amy said she walked the water dog run. Fortunately, I had to MC, and I didn't know how the timing was going to work. Otherwise, I would have walked with her. But I saw her cross the finish line, and her walk was the speed of probably my run. She was those speed walk things. So but in all seriousness, it was nice to be at the water dog run. I think, you know, one of the things that attracted me to BRSSD was the community feel. And definitely it was a small community feel, community connecting with one another, kids having fun. I think one of the funny things was when I was letting the dogs go, the dogs and people go. They gave me the kid run and the dog run. So the kids run were great. They wanted to go. There was no stages for them. It was like go. So we did the backwards count for 10, and then they all took off. For the dogs and their owners, I started it by making their dogs ask their dogs to sit. And their eyes got really big and said, "Oh," so I said, "I'm just kidding." And then we got them on their way. So a lot of fun there. And then, a little bit of a reflection this week came to me for thinking about volunteers. And like Jim shared, a lot of our schools are bringing back volunteers as we head into the month. We're getting all of our practices into play. We're opening things up and kind of slowly transitioning. The teachers that I met with today were really excited about that, getting their parent volunteers in and welcoming them back. But I also had a conversation with Diane Sexton, who's a teacher at Cipriani, who she shared unfortunate news with me. She shared that her mom passed away early this week. But she said, Dan, one of the things that she loved was volunteering in our schools. She spent 35 years regularly volunteering alongside of Diane and her classes and was part of the community. So, kind of that reflection is, community support helps our kids and helps our teachers, but it also gives our community some purpose too. It's as meaningful for them in many cases as it is for us. So our thoughts and prayers are with Diane and her family. And we, thank her mom, Marie Query, for all of her help and support over the last 35 years. And that's my report.
Thank you, Superintendent Farr. And now it's speakers wishing to address the board. To submit a question or comment on an item, please complete the speaker card by the start of the board meeting. Are there any? We do not have any speaker cards. Okay. But if there are any speaker cards for future agenda items, the Brown Act prohibits the board from acting or discussing any non-agenda items at this meeting, and public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person per topic. Okay. The next agenda item is the approval of the agenda and consent agenda. Was there any feedback on the agenda or consent agenda?
There was a couple of slight amendments on the board minutes. There was an issue with formatting, which is a software issue, and then just some clarifications of sending the letter to assembly members and senators as well.
Okay.
Make those corrections.
Okay.
I move that. I move that the board approve the agenda and consent agenda as presented with modifications as presented by the superintendent.
Second. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that was a unanimous vote. Thank you. Let's see, next up is item 11, educational services, informational item.
Thanks, Ching-Pei.
Hey, yeah, I'm coming. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We have actually a special treat today for the Ed Services update. It's not me talking to you at all. I wanted to introduce Principal Ryan Hanson-Vera, who is going to be sharing all about NSBA, and she has brought her team with her. I'm assuming you want to introduce them. So I'll share I'm happy to, but I figured Ryan has brought her team. They're going to share about NSBA, and we get to hear all the great things that are happening at our school sites rather than hearing them from my mouth. Come on up, Ryan.
Sure. Thank you for having NSBA this evening. I'm Ryan Hanson-Vera, the proud principal of NSBA, and I have two awesome members of our team with us. So I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Paul Lusich, I'm the counselor.
I'm Talia Carter, I'm the assistant principal. And they'll have some important highlights to share, but we wanted to start off sharing with you a bit about what makes Nesbit special. And as a TK through 8 school, we are always focusing on ways that we can remain connected so that everyone feels like they belong. And so one of our model practices that we wanted to highlight that we were so fortunate to bring back is called Puma Families. And we have a wonderful parent volunteer who assisted us in making this highlight video, and I can't wait for you to watch.
Okay, everybody, welcome to our Puma Families event. It's gonna feel a little crazy this first time we gather as Puma Families, but your Puma parents, you've transformed your teachers now into parents, have a really fun activity planned for you. And this is such a special thing that our school does, a way for every kid to get mixed up with a new group of kids, that we're making new friends, we're bonding as a school, and you get to know a new trusting adult on campus. Okay, so this is going to be awesome. It's going to feel a little crazy because you haven't been with your family yet. So our teachers, we're going to introduce them to you, and teachers are going to line up all across the grass. And then we're going to help you get into your Puma family. So kids are going to stay seated. Teachers, I need you with your signs, and we're going to call teachers up group by group so that kids can get a really good view on who their Puma parent is going to be, so everyone knows the right location. But before we get started, we have an awesome Puma parent, a real Puma parent, not a teacher we converted into a Puma parent, that is going to help us take pictures and document the fun that we're going to have today. So I want everybody to give a go Pumas to the camera. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go Pumas! Everybody wave to the camera. Woo! Awesome. Okay, so let's get started. I need another drum roll, kids. I need Miss Kailas, Miss Joshi, Miss Russell, Miss Martinez, Mr. Fox, and Miss Soares. This will be our little
Puma Families are a special Nesbit tradition in connection with our school's core values, in particular to be inclusive and safe. Puma Families provide students an opportunity to connect with another trusted adult on campus. This adult becomes their Puma parent for the entire time they are with us at Nesbit. Puma Families include children from all K-8 classrooms, giving students the opportunity to connect with peers of all different ages. It provides our older students opportunities to be role models to our younger students, and it helps our school community feel connected. Puma Families will meet 4 times this school year. We'll gather outside for activities that will bring us close together. For September's Puma Family event, Puma parents will read aloud a book, Eyes That Kiss in the Corners by Joanna Ho. And they'll engage students in conversations about our school's core values. Be respectful, responsible, safe, and inclusive. They'll also play getting to know you games and build their Puma family bond. Other meetings will include activities where Puma families get to contribute to the campus. They'll do a community art project, engage in collaborative activities, and build their unity as Pumas. Puma Families is the unique way our school strives to remain connected, build positive school-wide bonds, and ensure that everyone feels that they belong.
In, let it out. Settle our bodies, please. Thank you. That was a lot, but I'm glad we get to end it together in this way. I am proud of our school. I am thankful that we have such a beautiful community that comes together this way. And I can't wait for the next Puma Family event. On the count of three, I want to hear a group Pumas, and then I'm going to get you off to your classrooms. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Let's give a thank you to Mr. Sid, also our Puma parent video man, who's helping us create a video of this event. So a thank you on 3. 1, 2, 3. Middle schoolers, follow directions of your teachers as we go. First. It feels, you get a little teary-eyed watching that, because that's how much love is at our school. And it was wonderful that we're able to celebrate together in that way. And with that, our school site council has really worked closely together to craft 3 core areas of focus for this school year. So we have a very specific academic goal, a social emotional goal, and then kind of like a lofty statement for goal number 3. I know some of our goals don't quite have measurable outcomes as goal number 1 has, but I think that it all points to the important things that we're working on. So I'm going to share goal number 1 with you, and then Ms. Carter is really going to share some deep work that we're doing regarding language arts. So goal number 1 is to identify and implement the implemented targeted support plans to provide opportunities for all students to achieve with their academic potential and zone of proximal development in English language arts, specifically reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And we're planning on increasing our learners not meeting standards, specifically those that scored a 1 or 2 on the 2020 CAS by 10%. So as a reference, 61% of students at Nesbitt met or exceeded standards last school year. So that's leaving us 39% of students that didn't meet those standards. So we're really focused on closing that gap, but also analyzing and identifying in our data, what are those holes? Where did students miss the mark, and how can we help them get there? So Ms. Carter's going to go ahead and share some ways that we're going to do that.
Sure. So good evening, everyone. We have some specific action steps that we're really trying to put in place to target those students so that they can improve on CAS this coming year. And so one thing that's really wonderful that we're able to continue to do at Nesbitt is to partner with the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project. And so each grade in kinder through 5th grade will meet with a staff developer 5 times throughout the year. And we've been fortunate to already have our first meeting with our staff developers, and they really focused on helping teachers on areas that they've identified, and they were all around this goal and really thinking, how can we best support students who came in at a different point than what we're used to seeing given the pandemic, and what steps can we take in our classroom to support them both in reading and in writing. And so even though each grade might have had a different focus that they worked on with the staff developer, there was a point at our staff meeting where they were able to share out highlights and kind of share the knowledge and what they learned with each other, so that really everyone could benefit within our school community. We were also really fortunate to send, sorry, I feel like I can hear my voice shaking. I don't know why I'm so nervous, because this is stuff we do, but I'm really excited about. So we also were fortunate to send 3 upper grade teachers to a Teachers College Institute, and it was a mini institute that was held via Zoom, really focused on helping upper grade students who need support with phonological awareness and just early basic reading skills, because that's something that we're seeing as an increase in the upper grades, which is not something that you typically see in the upper grades. So our teachers didn't have as much foundational knowledge in that area to support their students. So we did have 3 teachers in the upper grades attend this institute, and then they came back and they were able to share out with the staff as well some of their highlights, as well as things that teachers specifically could do in their classroom to better support all of their learners. There was also some additional resources that were shared with our teachers at this institute that we've gone ahead and purchased to further support the students at our school. So in addition to partnering with TC and the work that we're doing with Teachers College, internally, we've also been working with the English Language Arts leadership team. And so we have a representative from each grade level that we've met with, and they've come to give us some update as well as what's going really well in their grade and what are some struggles. And then we've come together as a team to think, how can we best support them? At our initial meeting, I also spoke with them a little bit about how to make the most use of their conferencing time when they work individually with students, and how to specifically have really powerful compliments, which is how we start out a conference with the student, is complimenting them on what's working well. And so specifically giving them tips on how they can tie their compliment to a student's reading identity or their writing identity. So no matter what level they're performing at, they're still seeing themselves as readers and writers. And so that team was able to go back and share it out with other members of their grade level. So it's something that they could implement within their grade level span. And then in addition to that, we've also been meeting individually with teachers just to get a check-in on how things are doing. And they're able to like run down name by name across their class, just to give us kind of as a high level view of how kids are performing, which are some kids that we really need to keep an eye on, which are kids that we're sending to intervention. What are we doing to best support them so that we really can have like a global view of how things are going. And so I feel with this in place and our continued work with Teachers College and the amazing staff that we have that's really invested in this goal and really supporting our students, I'm really confident that we'll be able to meet or exceed it, hopefully.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, and then so goal 2 is really about attending to the social emotional learning and mental health needs of not only just our students, but our staff and our families. And we have a variety of tailored supports that we have in place. And this really piggybacks onto lofty goal number 3, which is like also a true narrative into the mission and vision of our school. So our school site council was really active in helping us prepare these things. Those are really what our school stands for. So I'll read goal 3, which is Nesbitt's program will empower students to develop healthy interactions, build strong interpersonal relationships, and make positive decisions. Nesbitt School will empower students to be thoughtful and resilient contributors to the school community, both around the campus and online. We will inspire students to provide them with the communication tools necessary to advocate for a respectful, responsible, safe, and inclusive school environment. And we'll have Paul come up and really share with you some amazing things that we've been working on together as a school community. Paul is a tremendous resource to our campus. And not only does he have the abilities now that he's with us full time to service our entire TK through 8th grade community, he's now really connecting with our families. And we saw that today at our first PTA parent coffee that we were able to have face to face. So many of those families he's already talked to, but it's either been on the phone or on Zoom. And now he's like a real life person. So I'm like really excited for you all to hear from Paul and the amazing stuff that he's doing.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, thank you guys. It's a pleasure to be here. And like Mrs. Hanson-Vera said, it was kind of funny being at the principal's coffee this morning. I think Mr. Howard was the only person I recognized. Although I'd exchanged emails with a number of the folks there. It was my first time actually meeting them. And there was a very easy warmth to it, a very real sense of community to the conversation that was happening. And so it was a real pleasure to see, a real pleasure to be a part of. And the context of what you guys are talking about with the brown bag lunches and everything else, I feel like I got to really feel a sense of that this morning. And so that was just, you know, as we segue, that was just something I experienced, and it was an absolute pleasure to experience. And I think something that's very special and specific to this district. So as far as, I'll stop talking about that and go on to my goal number 2. But so as far as some of the social and emotional learning and mental health needs and support that we offer, the first thing I just want to mention is some of the programs we brought in. So one thing that's really special about this district is they fund programs that are incredibly beneficial to our students. For our students in grades 1 through 3, we have programs like Second Step, Nearpod, and Purposeful People, which is an extension of Character Strong. And none of these are cheap, but they're all very, very good and very, very wonderful social emotional learning tools. And so there are these tools provided to our teachers to utilize for social emotional learning, which is wonderful. And a lot of schools don't have that access, and we do. So our teachers in grades 1 through 3 have those to use during our social emotional learning time. For grades 4 through 8, I go into the classroom myself and I teach SEL using Character Strong. And that's probably my favorite part of my job, if I'm being honest with you, just to get in the classroom, get to meet the kids and hang out with them. And it's an absolute joy and a pleasure to work with them. This is the first year we're kind of debuting Character Strong, and so far it seems to be going very well as a SEL program. And so far we've been really enjoying it. I've talked to the counselors at Ralston and they seem to be enjoying it. And so Mrs. Sevilla, who's not here, always does a wonderful job making sure we can do our work. And so she's done a wonderful job with providing us with those resources. And I think that our students definitely get to see the results of those as well. And so also, I provide individual counseling to our students as needed. One thing we've also started doing this year, now that we're back from the pandemic, is so when we've had students that maybe struggle in different ways, what I've started doing is have counseling sessions with the students, but I've brought in the parents via Zoom. And so it's not just counseling with the students, it's counseling with the students and the parents are involved as well. And making that connection has made all the difference in the world, which has been wonderful, because it's really as if the schools and the families are aligning and are on the same page. And we're really seeing changes in both just students' attitudes, students' behaviors, and it's been really wonderful to see. And it really speaks to how wonderful and committed and just caring the parents of our district are, because they're giving up their time during the week while they're at work to join these via Zoom. And so whenever we do this, I tell them how grateful I am and how helpful it is, because they're really doing a lot of the work for me. And I'm really appreciative of those parents and of the parents here. And so I really think we do have some special families in this district. In addition to that, we have social skills groups that we're launching. We're doing lunch groups. We have, the district has Care Solace as a referral source. So if kids need additional ongoing therapy, we can hook them up with Care Solace, which is long-term free therapy, which is really, really nice. We also just this week, we had the organization come in I've been working with for about 10 years, Star Vista, come in for our 8th graders, do a suicide prevention presentation, and for our 7th graders, do a stress reduction presentation. And that's always really nice to see, because it covers some topics that I think are incredibly important to cover. And I'd really want to make sure that we do everything we can to keep our students safe. And I think those conversations play a big part in it. So I'm grateful to Star Vista and what they do and what they've done for our students. Additionally, I'm a licensed trainer of restorative practices, and Ryan fortunately gave us the time to certify our entire staff in restorative practices. So the entire staff at Nesbitt is certified in restorative practices, which is a really wonderful thing. We've been doing a lot of community circles, which is part of that, and really sort of change the dynamic of how we approach the school. So the students have more of a sense of ownership over what's going on. They feel like less like things are being done to them and more like things are being done with them across all grade levels, which is really, really wonderful to see. In addition, our leadership students are trained in restorative practices and in peer mediation. The subtle difference being with peer mediation, there's not the power dynamic you see in bullying. And so it's more just sort of making sure an argument doesn't happen again. So we also have our leadership students occasionally involved in helping younger students resolve disputes, which is really heartwarming and fun to see when you see a couple of 8th graders helping out a couple of kindergartners who've been in a dispute. And so I'm always there in the room, of course. It's not as if they're on their own, but it's really a joy to watch and it's a lot of fun to see. Yeah, and so then we also, so the district is so fortunate. We have it's kind of a funny acronym, but TUPE, Tobacco Youth Prevention Education Grant. And there's a lot of financial resources there if we can pull together a peer group of students. And so it may seem like it'd be difficult because they have to go to 2 after-school trainings that are 3 hours each. But I was blown away. Last year over Zoom, I felt like I was really able to connect with the 6th graders at Nesbitt in particular and 7th graders, and it was really wonderful. And so I just asked the 7th graders, would anyone be interested in being part of this group? We had 20 students sign up. We have 20 students who want to be a part of this peer group, teaching our other students about tobacco use, tobacco prevention, vaping prevention, drug prevention, going in to talk to our kind of 6th grade and up classrooms about it themselves. And the really nice thing is them going and doing that provides us with $1,200 worth of grant money to work towards that, which is just wonderful. So our students are doing a lot of good work, and I can't take credit for that. That's our students who are willing to go above and beyond and go into their own time to help keep our other students safe and inform them about the dangers of tobacco, vaping, drug use, and all that. And especially with Red Ribbon Week coming up, I think it's just incredible what our students are willing to do on their own time. And I think that's it for me. So thank you guys so much for your time. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you, Paul. So this all comes together with something really important that we put in place in April of 2021. And that was that we made a partnership with Youth Truth. And for Youth Truth, we surveyed all families, and that was really taking part of how we would normally survey families as part of our Title I data collection. But this really, partnering with Youth Truth really gave us the platform to really get true feedback, really how our families are feeling and really what our families need. And with that, we also surveyed our students, because I think it is really important for us and this team that students have a voice at school, and that when they're sharing things about the school, they have the ability to help us make the change that we want to see. So all 3rd through 8th graders were also surveyed. The reason why we partnered with Youth Truth was because of their values. And they believe that this very powerful premise that when you are given timely feedback from those you're trying to serve, you're really going to be able to make the change. And that's why we partnered with them. And with that, it kind of sparked a little passion project for myself. So next slide is after compiling all of that data, first, we're definitely going to continue using Youth Truth, but it inspired me to start this little project called 30 Days of Data. And what I did is I pulled certain highlights from the Youth Truth survey and share them publicly on our Twitter page. So we're currently sharing them every week. So tonight I want to share with you 5 highlights that really pull at my heartstrings. So the first data point is that 90% of students surveyed at Nesbitt School responded positively to the following. Do you think your teacher cares about you? Nesbitt teachers care, and our students know it. The next data point is that learning at Nesbitt is relevant. Students really feel a connection as to what they're learning in the classroom will really help them outside of school. And that's the hook, especially with our older students, and making that bridge why learning is important. And so having relevant instructional methods is super important to us. And we're really happy to see that our students are also recognizing that. The next data point is probably one of the most heartwarming ones, because this is the first sign I saw as the brand new principal at Nesbitt when I walked onto that campus. And it is a tethered little sign, but man, does it have a lot of meaning. And so 90%, and this is a parent data point from Youth Truth, 90% of our community feels that our school respects people of different religions and faiths, that we respect people of different races, ethnicities, and countries of origin. And 90% of our families believe that we respect people of different abilities. So it's really letting us know and get feedback as a school that our core value to be inclusive is really penetrating and really making the mark that we want. And my favorite line on that sign is that love lives here. And it absolutely does at Nesbitt. The next data point is that we are responsive. Kids believe that when they make a mistake, their teachers are going to do whatever they can to help them get it right. And that children are not giving up because our teachers are constantly finding the different hook to get our kids re-engaged. And so we're seeing that this picture is, I love this one, it's from Hybrid. This student was so excited to get her writer's notebook back for the first time after being on Zoom. And so those little responsive actions mean the most for our kids. Next data point is one that I share, not because it has the highest rating, but because it has the biggest meaning for me as the leader moving forward. This is a middle school specific piece of data. And what it says here is that 57% of students in 6th through 8th grade believe that adults at school value what they have to say and are listening to the students when the adults have to make the decisions. And so bottom line is that we listen to what our students have to say and that we're going to keep improving, listening when they tell us that something's not going well or that something is, right? And so getting 6th through 8th graders to know that their voice has a purpose is why we will continue with Youth Truth. And one way that we will raise this kind of percent is by making sure that Youth Truth offers a wonderful workshop for students that really talks them through why giving honest, truthful feedback, even when you know your teachers and your principal may be utilizing that feedback, is part of the process in changing the school, and that this is their school and school is a place of love for them. So that is my little passion project. And I have this screenshot here because this is my view. Every morning from 8:15 to 8:20 when we host morning gathering. And every morning I have 609 smiling faces shouting "Go Pumas" to me before they go off and learn. And so Nesbitt is a very special place and we're very proud to share it with you tonight. So thank you.
So I know you sat down, but this is the point where ask questions that they have for you.
Sure.
Any questions?
I don't know that I have any questions. I just do want to give some feedback. I think I love the presentation. We, having been on the board for 8 years, we tended to sort of hear similar presentations, and tonight was so unique. And it really answered the question of what's special about Nesbitt. And we really appreciate that, because now I feel like some of the programs I might have heard something about, but now I really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And the fact that the Puma Families, love that. That was absolutely terrific. And also that you're using data to drive your decision-making and being really transparent with the community about that. Not all of those were 95% or something, but the fact that you're being transparent with the data and that, hey, we want to even up these numbers in these categories, and this is why we're doing it. That was terrific. I love the fact that the counseling sessions, you have integrated what we learned during the pandemic in terms of using Zoom and having the parents come in and join those sessions, which seems to be really productive. So just overall, everything that you all are doing as a team, it sounds like just making great progress, and love all the enthusiasm. Like I said, Nesbitt, any of the events you go to at Nesbitt, there's always such a feeling of spirit and warmth. So no questions, just keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'll echo what Sorna said. I echo everything, but definitely the data-driven Pumas hashtag really resonated. Just anytime you ask people to do a survey and then they never hear any results from it, it gets harder to get them to do it in successive times. And I think the fact that you're doing it, I think the Nesbitt families have always been very used to following the social media pages of Nesbitt. And so the fact that you're sharing all of the data makes them that more invested. And it just also reminded me or felt like the comment you made about the students feeling like they're a part of the decision-making process. It makes the families also feel like they're along on the journey with their kids and the school, because they see the results and then they can see ways that they can get involved. So it's super awesome. I just have one question. I've heard bits and pieces across the district about, as students have come back from being a year and a half at home, behaviors are different. And I think you alluded to that a little bit in the younger grades, or I think that was part of the board report. I was just curious, are you seeing any differences, and are you seeing it in any particular grade levels?
I think that we're not seeing it at particular grade levels. I think we're just seeing it in different ways. I think our younger students need to be really acclimated back to what it means to be a part of a big group of others, and that sometimes they need to be reminded that it's not just about yourself and that you're also kind of functioning with others. And so we're always talking to the kids about making the best choice to be the best human being, and that it's not just about you sometimes. So we're definitely having those conversations. I'll just be very blunt. There's lots of touching and lots of horseplay that we have to kind of redirect all the time, that they forgot how to engage and play. And so sometimes, like when we're like, hi, Rui, would you like to play tag with me? It will be initiated with, I'm just gonna come up and push you. If you like to play tag. So I think we're working on that a lot, and we're very active at yard duty. But I think a big piece of the work, that the reason why Paul has been such a resource is that he's not asked or required to be out there at every yard duty. He is, because it's part of his data collection. And that is the biggest piece about why we're so successful in helping correct what it means to return to school. And so because he's out there, he's really seeing some things in action. We're like organically being able to pull student groups together. That's why it organically came up to like get some peer mediators involved. And that was what sparked the idea, some incidents between students, to go ahead and let's just get the parents joined in short-term care, getting kids over some humps with their behavior so that they can be successful at school. So short answer is yes. We are seeing those things too, and we're working through them. That's fine. Thank you.
I'll just add to that. Comments, I agree with everything said so far. It was a great presentation. Appreciate you all spending your evening with us here and sharing that with us. The stories you gave about the kids really demonstrate the closeness of the community. And it's really heartwarming to hear all that. It's great to hear that, there's tools that are being provided that you're making use of. So that's really good to hear. And also the data-driven results. It's, numbers, speak for themselves. So seeing those percentages of especially the 90%, which one was it? The kid, do I feel that I'm being listened to, or the first one, but it was
Teacher cares about me.
My teacher cares about me, yes. Just seeing that means a lot. It means these kids really feel like they're being cared for, and it shows that the teachers are caring for the kids. Let's see, there was something else I was going to say. I think Trustee Gopali covered all my other takeaways I had from that. But just feedback about the format of this. I really like the format of having one school present in depth. I know in previous years we've had multiple schools, but I think I like this format a lot better. So thanks for setting this up. Thank you for coming and
Thank you.
sharing with us.
The biggest problem for me is I just miss that place so much. It just made me cry to watch this, and I'm still holding back tears. Brian and Paul and Talia, for every school there's challenges, and as a board we want to mitigate those as much as we possibly can for you. So I guess I'm looking for your insight into the things that we can do better to support you and help you achieve your vision. And is there anything that you see broadly as a big challenge at the site, and what solutions are you considering that you might come to us with later?
I'll be the bold one to take the first stab. What you see here before you is like true collaboration on what it means to make an administrative team. And I think that type of teamwork and dedication is happening right now, but at extreme exhaustion, because we have a staff member who is shared. And for her to fully invest and help grow our school and to grow some of those data points, we truly need a dedicated team. I also know that comes with financial, it could be problematic financially, but I also know that we're working tremendously hard, and that this is the core group of people that are really supporting our teachers. So like magic days like Puma Families and addressing all the pieces in our data can happen. That is one thing our school really needs. We are a large school, a TK through 8, who's trying to make big changes. We also have a very high concentration of children with special needs. And our number of special ed in comparison to our partner schools is out of proportion. And I have the most dedicated SPED team. I would love to bring them for a presentation next time I get to speak to the board. But I also know I have a team of teachers that are experiencing true burnout, not because of recovering back from the pandemic, but because they truly feel that they're not meeting all the needs of our students to the best of their abilities because their caseloads are too high. And so that's something I would love to brainstorm. We have wonderful people in cabinet that listen to our thoughts and support us immensely, especially our director, Laura Goldman, is constantly working with and supporting our team. But I think the numbers at Nesbitt need to be addressed so that there's better balance in our district.
Can piggyback off of it. Ryan said it's kind of funny. I mean, it's interesting because I'm in the position to talk about it. I love my position and I love both of the schools I'm at. But I think in terms of what's best for the students and what's best for each school site, I think having a dedicated assistant principal would be best for them. Just in terms of follow through with things throughout the week, in terms of building relationships with students and staff. Like I know I was in a first grade classroom the other day and they were counting the days and I think we're at like 40 days of school. But for me, I've only actually been at each school site like 20 days. So if I think of how am I forming relationships with the kids and with the staff, I have like half the time of others. And so I just think in terms of like follow through and rolling out programs, building the relationships, being able to support staff with their own development throughout the week, not just the couple of days that I happen to be there, would be best for the staff. And then for the students too, to always know like that I'm there. Like the kids that come up and hug me and are like, oh, where have you been? I'm like, oh, I've been at the other school site. I'm sorry, like I haven't been here. I think especially for the younger ones, I think it would be beneficial for them if they were able to have a full-time assistant principal. And then I echo as well what Ryan was saying just about the special ed population. I think it can be really challenging when we have 2 days a week where we have our IEP meetings, which are really important for us to be a part of. But on those 2 days, most of our time is spent facilitating and helping with these meetings, which means that we're not able to be out supporting staff or out around classrooms, really focusing on that instructional leadership piece. And so I think just if there was a way to rebalance it, I think it would be beneficial for the school as well.
So, you know, I think I'm a kind of a similar mindset, but I think it would be wonderful to have a full-time AD. I think just because we do get spread a little thin sometimes, half the time I'm functioning almost more like a dean than a counselor, especially when I'm on the yard or things like that. And I don't mind. I feel like we can do it and we can do it in a way that, or I can do it in a way that's still healthy and maintains my role as counselor, because we do use restorative practices. We do use peer mediations. We do use all these different methods that aren't conventional discipline. So it is still counseling. It is still, it's not conventional discipline. But I do feel like having the support of an AP would radically change the way we'd be able to handle situations like that. And so, you know, I think right now we're doing it well. We're doing it in a way where it doesn't compromise my ability to counsel with students. But I think it'd be wonderful just to feel, you know, like the couple of days we don't have Talia there, let's say like, you know, if it's just me and Ryan on the yard, or Ryan needs to be in a meeting and it's just me on the yard, then it's a very different dynamic when there's 600 kids and then just me. And so I think it, you know, I know it's finding difficult, you know, and I don't want to complain because I'm grateful that you hired a full-time counselor.
That's a good person.
I'm not complaining about how you guys spend the money.
We're asking you about challenges.
Yeah, but if you're asking candidly, that is my candid answer. And I'd echo, I think our SPED team is just incredible. I mean, I really can't say enough. And They're amazing. I worry a little about their burnout. So those are the two things I would say, and essentially what Brian and Talia were saying. And so hopefully, I said that positively enough, but that was it for me.
I have two follow-up questions. One is you have all said that the IEP load is challenging based on your current resources. And for us, how do we index that against the other sites so that we can help understand, what challenging means, because there's numbers and there's severities. And the second question is, one of the benefits to having somebody like Talia who's at both sites is it prompts a little bit more collaboration between Sandpiper and Nesbitt, which is something that we've wanted for a long time. How do you see those collaborations going? In particular, like extracurriculars and things like that?
I will say, so we'll go with your second question first. So I will say, as a collaboration piece, Ching-Pei and Dan have really helped push the principal team in building those bridges in a stronger way. And so already the collaboration and the relationship between Nesbitt and Sandpiper is very strong, just because Gloria and I are so in sync as principal partners in the TK through 8th model. We are currently sharing a flag football team with a coach, and that is also teaching our students that we're representing BRSSD together. And so already we're making those positive shifts together. And Gloria and I also have some big plans for addressing mathematics and how we can support a better pipeline when we're thinking about accelerated tracks of math. So those are already in the works because of Dan and Ching-Pei's work with us. I think that as for the assistant principal's role in that, I wouldn't think that that would be the hook in maintaining collaboration. I think we have identified as a model practice and program at Nesbitt. We are a wall-to-wall Teachers College school. We are affiliated and accredited with Teachers College. This is the method our school identifies with. And I think what sometimes can be challenging is that the assistant principals and code switching often between how to support that school, and that it's been challenging investing in Sandpiper's model practice and developing that. It's like just when you get the ball rolling, your day of the week is then changing and you lose momentum. So I wonder if shifting the leadership piece would actually make the collaboration between the sites stronger, because we have something to offer one another.
And the other question was about indexing the IEP load.
Yeah, I think that we work really hard in communication with Laura and Dan and Ching-Pei and enrollment regarding making sure our numbers are appropriate, particularly when it comes to our middle school. So we're thinking that we have 47 7th graders, but then there's 15 504s. Like we're really struggling with the balance, and that sometimes it can really feel in our middle, specifically in our middle school program, that because our numbers are lower, that it can feel like the concentration of special ed needs is higher, and that really does need to be addressed. And one way that Dan is supporting me is that really researching program design so that we can really reshape and build a stronger program at Nesbitt so that we are retaining not just our Nesbitt students, but we're also attracting others to want to attend Nesbitt for a specific reason. And so I think the ask for support from the board and from the district would be to help us build and follow through with making sure that Nesbitt's International Baccalaureate program that we are going to start investigating really hits the ground running, that we have follow through. It also means that we may have to get creative with FTE and staffing when it comes to making sure that program goes to fruition, because it will not be successful if we maintain the current demographic that's making up our middle school program. As for just the number and volume of our IEPs, many of these students that are identified happen to just be our Nesbitt students, like they are our community kiddos. I think that also something that we can consider is how we spread and make sure we're balancing our teams across the schools and offer some like school choice and balancing when it comes to students who receive special services, because we have so many. I think of our 3rd grade team is really impacted with special ed, and are we offering the best of ourselves if so much of our time is not dedicated to all the learners? And I think that we really struggle at Nesbit, kind of keeping the momentum going at this point. Our service providers are at max capacity. And so I think we really do need to discuss some comparison data district-wide and how we address that issue.
And we can get some additional data for the board tomorrow.
Yeah.
Could I ask a follow-up actually to what Mrs. Hanson-Vera was just saying? You were mentioning the fact that you want Nesbit to also attract students who wouldn't be located in the proximity of Nesbit, right? So, and you mentioned the IB program, et cetera. One of the things that we've talked about is at the board level in our retreat is making sure that our students are ready for high school, wherever they go, from whatever middle school that they graduate from. And it seems like there are some areas where, depending upon which school you go to, you may not have the same opportunities. So for instance, we talked about world languages, advanced math, some of the extracurricular opportunities. Have you thought about, or what would be your reaction, sorry to put you on the spot, about sort of a collaboration between the K-8s in terms of being able to, say, share faculty and being able to, so that both sites then are able to offer those kind of opportunities?
Yeah, I think that also principals have been really encouraged to like strongly develop your program and program identify. So I think one way to maybe address this issue is that Ralston has a very comprehensive middle school program, comprehensive and traditional, lots of opportunities, but their structure is traditional. Whereas Sandpiper and Nesbit have this beautiful opportunity to really program identify and make sure that those programs are strong so that we are really having the choice that we're marketing that we say that we have. And so I think that if we're talking about sharing staff or the collaboration between those two sites, I really think it's more about making sure that we have a solid program that Sandpiper chooses is best for their community or best option to offer at BRSSD, and that so does Nesbit. I'm not quite sure about the sharing staff question. I think maybe the programs that our schools identify with will have some unique needs. But I also think what a great way to make a better bridge if we're talking about things like ensuring that we're offering enough sections of advanced placement math, or that we're offering enough sections of world languages. Nesbit at this time is fortunate to go ahead and have a Spanish elective, and we've made some real changes with that this year, because we used to offer a Spanish opt-in class that was only for 8th graders because it was helping them pre-qualify for classes in high school. We decided that that was not giving enough children exposure to language to help them be prepared for the classes that they need to take in high school. So we changed the course description, and now every single student is going to get a Spanish class. We've just lowered it to a more conversational based Spanish, so that they are getting the exposure that they need to be prepared. And so that's already creating one bridge for them. We see the same for math. We want to make sure that our students that have qualified for our accelerated math, for us, it seems like a smaller percentage because we're smaller, are truly getting the dedicated time and the dedicated resources from a trained teacher to be able to qualify for advanced placement math as they go up through the system in high school. I don't know if that totally answered your question.
It did. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah, I echo all my fellow trustees and the appreciation for all the work that you guys have done at Nesbit. I did have a couple of follow-up questions related to Youth Truth, because I know the district is adopting it for other schools. So wanted to understand, like, what was the participation rate? And does Youth Truth, if you design it correctly, does it give you additional data to understand why, like that 57%, do you have the understanding of why it's that number? And what are some lessons that we can learn from your experience as other schools start to use Youth Truth?
The best service that Youth Truth provides is that before you launch your data session, before you launch your survey, and then after you get your survey results, they provide you a 60-minute presentation where I have the ability, I invited Talia, and this was before she even joined our staff, so she already got a preview of the data. And then I also invited some Dan and some of our school site council members, and they go through each data point with us and where we fell. We had a 75% parent participation rate in comparison to what our Title I internal survey used to be. It was a huge improvement. But we're also getting data that doesn't just tell us, are you receiving free and reduced lunch and your socioeconomic status? We were getting true feedback on how parents felt about the program we were offering. So that's invaluable. When Youth Truth was sharing with us, the 75% is actually, they gave us kudos. Like that was actually a wonderful participation rate from parents. Regarding the 3rd through 8th graders, remember we were doing this during hybrid. So some of our students were distance and some of our students were face-to-face. And so we actually had 101 participation rate. And so that is because maybe some students participated in both sessions. But there was also students that they took the survey, but then they didn't attend school, if that makes sense. We had some new enrolled students that then took the survey, so it increased our score. But our teachers made it part of the classroom instruction. So we had true feedback from them. And part of the student survey, and this is like the hard part about when you receive feedback, right? There is an open kind of ability for students to give open response. So they can really like write how they feel. And so the parents were given that opportunity too. And that's actually the first report I downloaded. It's hard to read sometimes, because it gives people the power to kind of also, it's anonymous, so people can really tell you how they feel. It's kind of like a Twitter comment or something. So you can really go through and highlight those things, but then digest them, and you have this like wonderful 60-minute meeting to talk it through with these wonderful supportive educators from Youth Truth. The awesome part of the team is that they're also all former educators. So they're really developing these surveys with the growing of schools in mind, just not a nonprofit agency that's like looking to like take your money and just tell you, give you a random percent. They're super invested with uncovering why. Like, why is it that only 50% of my kids think that teachers include them in decisions, but they're saying 90% of their teachers care about them? Like, why aren't they seeing that as the same? I think for our parents, what came up was not understanding Teachers College and wondering if their children were being academically challenged. And so that was a real hook for us in deciding what was going to be our communication style this year. So we're really pushing our teachers, please explain what unit you're in, what mini lesson you're on. Every time we're making an Instagram post that shows kids writing, let's describe the teaching point. Like, let's make sure our parents understand what their children are learning, because when you get in the car and you ask your kid how school was and they're like, nothing happened. You can really have some follow through as to what those book bags mean, and that's actually associated with something, a mini lesson in Teachers College, and that is considered academic challenge. And so it gave us invaluable pieces of data to uncover to help make change. We did not do the survey where we included staff. We had the opportunity to, but I also think I needed to get to know my school's community and the students. And I also think that receiving all of that data can be hard and a lot to unpack. And so we're ready to get some feedback from our teachers and to really see how they're feeling about the program. So they will be included this year. And then, though the district is really helping us financially cover this, Nesbitt's also reserved some funds in agreement with our school site council to provide that professional development piece with Youth Truth. We've made a relationship with Jimmy and Alana now, who service our school, and they'll come and provide small sessions for students, debriefing sessions for teachers to really help us through understanding our data. Because you're right, I do want to do 30 days of data again next year and like compare. And many of these same questions and themes will show up.
Can I add one thing to that too? We did share at our retreat a lot of the data with our staff too. And I think they found it was really powerful to have that feedback too, and to especially get it prior to the start of the year, because they immediately were thinking like, how can we from like day one be thinking about this information, knowing that we're giving it to the kids and the parents again this year, like what changes can I plan for this year to help our numbers go up? So I think the longevity of doing the survey every year will also not only help us get feedback, but really help them to improve their practice as well and make sure that we're serving students in the community in the best way possible.
Awesome.
Just want to say thank you to the three of you for your outstanding leadership. The one word that kind of comes to mind as I kind of think about the presentation and my visits is thoughtfulness. I think you're approaching everything with a really thoughtful perspective. You as leadership, but also your staff. When I come on campus, I see a warm, caring, nurturing environment. You've all set up structures that help success fester and grow and be contagious. That's an interesting word in these times, right? Contagious. Contagious, right? But I just really appreciate the work.
COVID-19 of teaching leadership.
The
Delta variant.
I appreciate everything that's happening at Nesbit. Some really great work, excellent leadership on your side as well as your staff. It takes, a village, and I recognize that everybody is stepping up to that. And I know that I'll speak on behalf of the board. We do hear you when you ask for that extra support and contextualize that. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good night. With that, we are on agenda item 12, public hearing and resolution of textbook sufficiency.
So I think you guys open the hearing.
Okay,
Close the
go straight into the hearing. Okay. So we are opening the public hearing at 7:37 PM. And seeing no comments, I guess I will close the public.
Students should have textbooks.
All right, and so with that, we will close the public hearing also at 7:37.
Okay, and it's just, this is our information item. All books have been ordered and arrived, and our kids have what they need. It's pretty straightforward.
Awesome.
That's good.
I think it is on for action though.
Is it?
I move.
Yeah,
There's a recommendation.
yeah.
There is a resolution that you're supposed to approve.
Yes.
I move to approve the resolution number 8 regarding textbook sufficiency.
Second. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and the vote is unanimous. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, I'm up next again. Tonight.
Sr3 Expenditure Plan.
Okay, so the Sr3 Expenditure Plan, I'm so glad the agenda is up there, and I can't for the life of me remember what SR stands for, but it's right there. Elementary Secondary School Emergency Relief Act. We got a new set of funds that we are then required to write another plan for. So the Sr3 plan as attached is a documentation of how we are applying these federal funds.
Can I do a quick clarification on that? So the state provided us with an expanded learning opportunity grant, and there was a plan that was approved for that. The federal government then said we are going to release these Sr3 funds to fund expanded learning opportunities. So the state said the money that we said we would grant to you under ELO is now partially funded from ESSER. So it's actually
It's a repackaging of the ELO that you already approved back in May that had all of the community support and all of the stakeholder meetings that align with the various requirements. And so this is a joint item that's really, obviously the financial stuff comes from her. But the plan is there's no new action. It is a realignment so that the part that the federal government is paying for is now aligned within Sr3. Two questions about the content of how we're using the money.
Well, not so much how we're using, but I was curious, as we went from distance learning to in-person learning, how does the amount of funding change, or does it change as we're going back to non-distance learning and non-pandemic times, hopefully very soon? The dollar amount change?
Sorry, can you say that first part again?
Yeah, we had distance learning.
Yeah.
Different finances. Now we're coming back to in-person, but in a post-pandemic world, does the amount of funding change or how does it change?
Base amount of funding. There's base funding, which has it, that's just normal COLA and all of that. And then there's the grant part of it.
Yeah.
And so depending on what you mean by change, in one sense, this Csva hasn't changed at all because it is just a subset of the grant amount that was given to us by the state under expanded learning opportunities. The state just hadn't decided how they themselves were going to fund the amount that they had promised.
I see. Okay, thanks.
Marie, correct me if I'm wrong. The amount of funding remained consistent through COVID, ongoing funding, with the exception of all the one-time funds that we received along the way.
Yeah. Okay.
With the one impact being the hold harmless clause, right? And so the ongoing funding, we were held harmless, i.e. held consistent with 1920 levels. And because districts are funded on the higher of current or prior year, in the 2021 school year, we compare this year in 2021. Sorry, in 21-22, we are compared with 2021, which was benchmarked at 1920. So we're being funded on 1920 levels because of hold harmless. So that's the ongoing piece.
Okay.
And I believe this is on for action as well.
Yes. I'll make a motion to approve the Sr3 plan as submitted.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the vote is unanimous.
Awesome. Shortest board meeting for me.
All right, the next one is developer fee justification study authorization.
Yes, so essentially when there are either commercial or residential developments, a portion of a fee they have to pay goes towards the school district under the theory that the school district should receive funding, facilities related funding when there are new families coming, which could then increase facilities needs. That amount, what that amount is, and that's of course split between us and Sequoia. What that amount is determined by the board. And we have actually not raised our amount since 2014. So we're doing a justification study right now in order to later bring back to the board a resolution to increase the proportion of that fee that we collect.
Go
ahead.
I was gonna say right now, the two of them I'm aware of, the Firehouse Square and the old Ice Lands development that's off Old County Road, is that right?
Yes.
So I just had a question as I was reading the blurb that went to give the information about this particular agenda item. It looks like we have an agreement with Sequoia Union High School District. So if it's an agreement, then once we do this study, assuming that what's the study going to show?
Yes, great question. So the amount of developer fees that are collected will rise, but the agreement we have is on a set dollar amount.
So it's not by
it's not a
percentage.
ratio. It's not a percentage. It's an amount. It's a 46 cents or, it's a dollar amount that is set on that. And so it is essentially a rebenching because Sequoia actually collects everything and then they distribute to all their elementary districts. And so this allows us to rebench ours because as that fee goes up without the elementary boards passing a resolution, they're keeping the difference essentially.
Since 2014.
Correct.
Okay. And so right now, what is the percentage that we have?
It's not a percentage, it's a dollar amount. I think it differs for residential and commercial. I want to say it's 46 cents and 126.
So the blurb reference is 60%. So would the thought be that we move to a percentage basis rather than an amount?
So you bench you based on kind of enrollment and all these, and there's professionals who do this calculation. You say you use a percentage to justify the dollar amount, but it's always pegged at a dollar amount. Does that make sense? You're like, we deserve 60% of what's happening right now, i.e. 61 cents. But then if the overall dollar amount goes from $1 to 105, you're still at 61 cents.
I see. And so to justify a change in the agreement, you always have to do this.
You're showing the difference since you last benched.
Okay. And so the process, sorry to ask you a lot of questions. I'm just trying to understand the process. So the process is going to be, we do this study. It's going to show obviously an increase over since 2014. Then we go back and we amend the agreement. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the board would pass a resolution following up from the justification study.
Up to 60% of whatever that total amount is.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, interesting. I don't remember engaging in this before, so it's helpful to know. Thank you.
Maybe by the time we joined the board, the study had already been done.
Might be.
Probably.
It was that
And we
long
just
ago.
approved the resolution and didn't know why. So I'm actually curious, it seemed like in the past, every elementary school district's amount was the same. Is that by design or it just happened because it didn't seem like all the studies were done at the same time, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll have to look into that because I haven't
Okay.
looked into kind of the other elementaries.
Yeah,
Their
it
studies
just
and their
seems
rules.
odd, like if the studies were done at different times, how come everyone's numbers are exactly the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can definitely look into it.
Okay. Interesting.
And I'm curious, how much funding annually typically does this bring in?
A few $100,000.
200?
Yeah.
This is just an informational item, correct, right?
That's right. I believe the actual contract has already been approved. So
Yeah, it was in the consent, I think.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. Battery died, but I have a printout, so I'm good. Oh,
It's the RFQ.
is it the same?
It's USB-C.
Oh, is it? Okay. Here, I'll just charge it up. Wait, oh, on this side. All right, but I've got a printout that's.
Apple and Google working together.
Feels a little wrong.
All right, the next agenda item is the request for qualifications for infrastructure modernization and utility savings.
Yes, so there's a lot of interest and opportunity out there right now for essentially utility savings. So there's different financing streams available and there's different, ranging from solar to lighting sort of projects that quote pay for themselves. And out of that has come a market for general contractors who specialize in this. So they'll help you benchmark your savings, find the financing, all of that. So we are, we last did a modernization project around 10 years ago. And so, I think the potential for our facilities is lower than, perhaps some other districts. That said, it is always worth looking into this opportunity. So this is just an RFQ, and what we're looking for right now is that general contractor. So not the specific projects that we'll do, but someone who we will work with to identify the opportunity and identify the scope, if any, potentially of what our savings could be.
So I guess the contractor is actually going to facilitate the request for quotes. Is that how that works? Because it looked from the background, they actually do the construction and the work itself as well, right?
Yeah, they oversee that. So they'll usually have subcontractors, right? So as an example, we did our playground project. Block was our general contractor who helped us scope and they worked with the architects, but then they hired a different company who actually came in and, dug up the turf, and a different company actually produced the parts. So those would be the subcontractors, and our general contractor would certainly guide us through that. Typically, the way that structure works is the general contractor is paid as a percentage of your total projects. So yeah, again, we're seeking a general contractor who specializes in energy efficiency to help us scope that out. And within these energy specific general contractors, they will typically help with the financing piece as well. So whether it's a PG&E financing, grants, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I'm happy to see this going through. I'm a big fan of energy conservation, green energy. So really happy to see this. Don't want to spend a lot of time on it so we focus on student achievement, of course, but I'm glad we're taking the step to be better environmentalist and to maybe save the district some money on these things. And I'm just curious what, once the contract is going to come in, they get the RFQs and everything. Can you go through maybe next steps on what might happen if they find solutions that are attractive to the district?
Yeah, so timeline wise, our first step is again, finding this general contractor. So we're inviting them to, come visit a couple of our schools and then we'll do interviews with the idea of identifying one in January. They'll then spend the next few months doing more detailed sizing of the opportunity. And then most likely after that, so summer and fall, kind of starting to identify specific scopes and going out for formal bids on that. So realistically, if there's construction involved, it's going to be not this coming summer, but next summer.
The questions?
How do we piggyback on your energy efficiency project so they can upgrade our houses?
Well, I did have one more question. I guess as part of this process, I think we had talked in the past about creating a facilities master plan that could also support our vision of the strategic plan. Like how can the facilities kind of support that? Is that going to be kind of considered as part of this effort? Because we're refreshing our strategic plan and there ought to be kind of a vision for how our buildings could help support the strategic plan and maybe standards across different school sites, right?
Yeah, that is actually something that my team is working on. I would say energy efficiency is a sub bullet of that, but it wouldn't make sense to have our general contractor be doing any sort of facilities master plan for the district.
Okay.
Along the lines of energy efficiency, it also occurs to me that we should be thinking about water efficiency, given
Yes.
what we're dealing with in California these days.
Yes, that is, I actually think we may have named that of water conservation. So, small things might be things like smart sprinklers that, don't, which we have at a couple of our sites actually, but not all of them. So yes, water efficiency is also in there in terms of utility savings.
Well, we have covered all the water fountains, if that's neat. That's like-
Exactly. Yeah, that was step one of the energy efficiency. Actually, glad you caught it.
Okay. And then I think, was this a discussion item or was this?
Information.
It was
Yeah.
informational. Yeah.
All right. Next is the CSBA board policy update, September 2021, first reading.
Great. So before you tonight is it's our standard policy revision process. CSBA it revises their policies regularly, shares them with districts, and if it's a policy that we have, we go through and amend our policies. There were several policies that we did not have this time. The COVID mitigation plan, which really is kind of a restatement, repackaging of all of the protocols that have come down from the state. We did not go that direction initially, so recommendation not to add it at this point. We don't have high schools, so a few of those were not applicable. And then at the bottom, we had a placeholder for developer fees. The developer fees policy adjustment isn't in this packet. We'll bring it at a later date, but this is first read. No actions needed today. We'll be collecting feedback, and if there's any changes, we'll make them in for the second.
I do have a question. It's about board policy 6164.4 parens A, which is about identification and evaluation of individuals for special education. So the information that's in yellow, that's the new, so this is an existing policy we had, right? And
That is.
And the yellow is the new stuff?
Yes.
New language. So I'm just looking at more, I just wanted a clarification on page 2 of that.
And that was 6164.
6164.4B.
Okay.
So I'm just looking at the second page and the second paragraph, where it's basically laying out who could provide referrals. And I understand parents, guardians, teachers, appropriate professionals, agencies. I'm wondering why do we have other members of the public? That seems, it seems really, well, I'll just say, I don't understand, because I can understand if you're an appropriate professional, your parent, guardian, a teacher, member of an appropriate agency, it doesn't seem appropriate that just random members of the public ought to be. I don't understand the reasoning.
Let me, Director Goldman, you reviewed, I think, this policy. Do you have insight into the CSBA recommendation for that change?
I don't have specific insight, although I do know that anyone can make a referral for special education and regarding a student, and members of the public may include the students, doctors, and therapists. So that can go get referrals that way. But I reviewed it with the SELPA. They did not have any issue with any of the new language, but I will get back to you on in particular.
Great.
Regarding that statement.
Right, because I think, you know, doctors obviously would be covered by appropriate professionals. So I think that's, maybe I'm reading it too closely. I just feel like other members of the public sounds like
Would it be
does not make
something
sense.
like a coach or, you know, like extracurricular activities where the teacher there might provide feedback? I don't know. I'm hypothesizing.
We can ask for additional clarification.
Yeah, like
of
what
the SELPA.
examples that would be.
One comment I'll make, I noticed the word others was struck through and the word other members of the public was added. So I don't think it changes the scope of the current policy. But I take your point, but we should consider that I don't think the scope is changing with this change.
We'll seek clarification either way. Thank you.
If there's no other feedback, then we'll move to the next item, is item 17, resolution calling for state officials to ensure order at school board meetings and protect trustees.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start with just an introduction to this item. This item is on the agenda tonight. It is listed as an action item. That said, this came about from a CSBA policy about protecting board members in general. I will say that locally, we have had very smooth meetings. We have a tremendous amount of support from our local governments, both Belmont and Redwood City, both Belmont Police and Redwood City Police. So I just want to be transparent about that. But also I want to share that there was some concern to make sure that this resolution was fitting for our local context and perhaps needing to look at tailoring the resolution a little bit more to meet our needs. So.
Yeah, personally, I'd like to request that we pull this item for tonight's agenda so that we can work on language a little bit. I get the overall intent. It's just some of the language I worry might be unintentionally divisive. And, you know, as people skim things, there's potential for the intent to be misread. And so I worry about that a little bit in the current phrasing of the resolution.
Yeah, and you know what CSBA provides is really a template, and they actually had one template for districts that were having issues and one that was without issues but wanting to support the districts that had issues. So definitely there is an opportunity to further modify the language to fit the local situation. So.
And I agree with the intent. We should be supportive of those boards
Sorry.
are facing some duress at this time. because it's a really challenging time in certain local areas. Again, we haven't had the same degree of discontent in the meetings, so we just want to make sure that we're saying the right things that align with our values, and there's opportunities to, in fact, I think, separately from this resolution, commend our local police and commend our local community for their decorum and professionalism and interest in civic responsibilities and doing it in a way that is productive.
I'll just add that I agree with these comments, but I also wanted to add that I feel that we're fortunate we live in a community that embraces civility, and I have a strong feeling that's going to persist. And I want to say that I do believe that we get support from our local law enforcement agencies as well. So just want to put that out there, and happy to discuss this further before we adopt anything at this moment.
Yeah, I agree. I think if there are concerns, we ought to work those out.
All right. And then I think was the intent to have two trustees kind of work more closely on it. Is that the idea?
That would be reasonable.
Okay.
That'll work.
Right.
So I will, between now and next meeting, I'll work with, we can go ahead and decide two trustees.
I'd be happy to work on the language.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I can too, unless someone else wants to.
You guys
Okay.
can work on the language. Yeah.
Okay, so.
Right. So it'll be trustee Howard and Bapale.
Great. We probably should have an official, do we need an official motion to table?
A motion to table item number 17 until further rewarding has been achieved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so the vote was unanimous. And then on to number 18 is our 21 to 22 district goals.
Great. Before you tonight is something you've seen a few times in the past. It's our district goals. I took into consideration the feedback from our last meeting, made a few amendments. I tried to strip away some of the things that were pretty firmly in place already, as well as I added world language into our graphic to show our thought process. This is up for approval tonight.
Any feedback or?
I might have a comment too.
Okay.
Yeah, some observations, not so much about the goals themselves, but the process. And I think all these goals that we've listed down are great achievements, or they would be great achievements for the district to accomplish. However, some of them are kind of vague and not focused. In my professional life, we make goals and we use the term SMART goals, which is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And when you have a goal that's a SMART goal, it has much more chance of actually being accomplished. So maybe in the future, next year when we talk about goals, we could kind of use that framework if the board is agreeable. And another thing I'll say, maybe on our part as a governance team, it's, the year is a quarter way done and we're still talking about goals. So as governance team, I feel maybe we could have done better in getting these earlier in the school year, and maybe open up a discussion for whether maybe we should talk about the district goals in June for the following year. And that way the administration has the summer to kind of plan and get things going. So I'll leave that open for discussion.
I think that's a great idea. The hard part is there's a lot of things that have to get done in June too, before we we close up. So I guess it's always that balancing, but in general, I think that's a great idea. Perhaps if we have, for instance, like a July meeting or something like that, we might be able to front load some of the goal setting. Because I agree, I think it's difficult when we're working on goals in September or August, and then it does take time to really sort it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think this year, unlike some previous years, we had a lot of agenda items for our board retreat. And then we ended up having to schedule multiple retreats after that to finish. So
We're still working on it.
I know. And so that was a little bit atypical, because I think in the past we would have a very general discussion at one of the meetings in June, kind of like, some just high level thoughts, and then narrow it down in the August retreat. And then we were close to done at that point, so it seemed to take longer this year, but we had a lot of things on the table for some reason.
I wouldn't mind suggesting, I know that August retreat is a little bit of a challenge for me in terms of timing. Getting everything going for the school year and just maybe launching it or about to launch it. So I would probably welcome a late June or early July kind of, if we can work through the calendar, if that's amenable. And look at timing for that.
Okay.
Great.
All right. There's no other feedback. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the district's 2021-2022 goals.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Nice work.
The vote was unanimous. Yeah, great job, everyone. I think it was a very collaborative process and a lot of interaction to get to the goals for this year.
Yeah. And Sam, like, I totally agree with you. The using that smart aims tool is very helpful in these situations to make sure you're making progress.
Great. Next item is future board meeting agenda items.
So before you there, you see all of our items, our 2x2s and 2x2x2s kind of keep getting pushed down. I believe we finally have solidified with Sequoia this last week. Is that right? Right? We finally solidified there. And one thing I will share, that if it's of interest to the board, we have a partnership with the Sequoia Collaborative. It's really comes out of the Ed Services Department, but it's a collaborative effort between all of the elementary schools that feed into Sequoia. We work on a number of different projects collaboratively, specifically focused on English language learners has been our most recent, and assistant superintendent who has her network within the group. I meet with superintendents as well. And there is a focus on trying to get us aligned there. So happy to have representatives from our group come and share that, if that's of interest to the board as well. Can add that to the November meeting.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that sounds good.
Great.
I had a question. When is the 2x2 set for with Sequoia?
December?
2x2, December 9th at 1 p.m.
Oh, December 9th. Okay.
And then with the Sequoia, actually, so that'll get pushed back. We had hoped there would be a debrief, but I think it just got solidified last week. So
I guess that needs to be moved. And then the other thing I was going to say is November 30th is the Carlmont field trip, right? So maybe on December 9th, could we also debrief that as well?
And do we have a date for the 2x2x2 with Redwood City and Belmont now? It looks like December 15th?
December 15th at 2 o'clock.
Okay.
Wait, 2 o'clock?
5.
That's what we're going for. There's 2 more people that they were waiting for on Redwood City side.
Okay.
Okay.
So we have 5 to 6 on here.
I know.
So,
Oh, it's 2 to 3, not 5 to 6.
yeah. We'll make sure the invites are out.
Okay.
The coordination with multiple agencies has been a challenge, especially when we try and get everybody there. It's Kirsten's work, doing a work of magic, it seems like. So thank you for that.
And are those going to be in person then, or is it virtual, or is it?
I think so. This is a pretty small group, so.
Yeah, we'll push for in person.
In person,
Yeah.
We'll push.
but seems to be the default right now.
Great.
Oh, it's Zoom, not in person?
We're pushing for in person, but we'll have to get that confirmed.
Okay.
Yeah, I think sometimes the in-person gets harder because people have to get themselves to
Yeah.
a certain
Yeah,
location, so it gets even harder to schedule, but we'll.
We'll confirm that.
Okay.
I noticed on, I guess, the January, we have a parcel tax presentation. Timing wise, is that give us enough time to work a resolution? I think we were talking about potentially June, but
Yes,
or is there any?
I believe that's the date that TDWBH gave us. We have Rui and I have a weekly call with them. So actually, on our agenda is looking at timelines and making sure that's established. So we'll be double checking that, but yes.
Anything else? Okay. All right. And then with that, we will transition to the equity study session.
Fantastic. Do you want to take maybe a 5-minute break?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just so we're in the right state of mind for a new section. Okay, so we will take a break at 8:12 and then we'll come back at 8:17. missing,
this part.
yeah, we need to, you're missing a trustee.
Oh, sorry.
Is this part still getting broadcasted or is this just like, Jay, we're here in public?
All right.
The video
it just-
was.
Yeah, the video was, and then it looks like the mics are back on. Okay,
Yes.
so
This is
we
still
are
part of
gonna.
our
Let me see if I'm sharing.
Yeah, resume our board meeting at 8:23. So we took
Watch
a
our piece.
little bit of a longer break.
Yes.
10 minutes instead of 5.
Great. So we set.
The audio just came on.
Great. Perfect. So tonight, our deck is similar to the one we've seen in the past as we've gone through. Really a couple goals for tonight is following up on the activities that we started. Tonight's focus will be on conversation, doing a little bit of reading, thinking about some strategic questions to get us to norm a little bit around what we believe equity is. And then we'll conclude with taking a look at our equity statement. I will say that we're to the point where all the words matter. And we want to be very precise in our language while getting some feedback as we go. So we're not totally there yet. What I'll end up likely suggesting tonight is that we ask a couple of trustees to do a subcommittee, work with me, look at all the different feedback, ask critical questions, make adjustments so that we can come back, share it with our community again, get a little bit more feedback from our outside stakeholders, and then adopt it and include it into our policy. Again, I want to piggyback on when Nicole Anderson was here, she talked about these 4 agreements. One is staying engaged, experiencing discomfort, speaking our truth, and expecting and accepting non-closure. These conversations are for them to be meaningful, you need to be able to share what's important to you and your story. And sometimes as you're telling stories, that can be interpreted in different ways. So while we're vulnerable with each other, if we have questions, it's important to ask about those perspectives with an open mind, recognizing that we're all in different paths on the journey to understanding equity and what it means in our lives and also in our schools. Yep. We had had some shared text. I just want to kind of leave with a thought, and it's interesting because I know we've heard Assistant Superintendent who mentioned this several times. A lot of times when we do things in an effort to help specific groups or individuals, we end up doing something that supports everyone. And if outside of education, in the architecture building world, the curb cut effect, right? When we cut the curb so that wheelchairs could go up, we also made it easier for walkers. It had a lot of positive implications outside of just the design. So, really when we think about how we're servicing and working with our students, there's thoughts of, bringing student groups up. The reality is, we want to bring student groups up, but every rise and everybody rise. Okay. So when we're working with one group, we really see the benefits across the board. So last week, I'm going to go ahead and pass this around. I did some copies so you don't have to, I think I made enough to go that way too. So Cabinet, if you guys want to take a look at these two and kind of follow along, I think I made enough copies. So last month, we took a look at equity stances, 5 stances, A through E. And we asked ourselves, when we think about equity, where do we fall in these different stances? And if I captured it right, most of us were in either the C or D category. So equity as personalized opportunity, or equity as an equalization opportunity. So I'm going to go ahead and focus on those two areas. Did I capture those? I think that's right from last time. So with that, we're going to go ahead and do some protocol, do a little protocol around the question of what do you think schools should do regarding equity in education. So in Appendix B, which I'm going to give you right now, send a couple that way. Or so Appendix B takes it to the next level. So it describes the stance, and then it provides an example of the practice. And then it asks some tough questions for those who take that stance. And those questions are going to serve as our conversation points to hopefully deepen our understanding and shared work. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first one. So C, if you go just jump down to C, equity as personalized opportunity. Schools should guarantee each student will receive an academic program that is well designed to meet the student's unique needs. Example of the practice, school practices and resources are distributed according to the school's judgment of what each student needs, which is informed by educators, the student, and the student's caretakers. Tough questions for folks who take that stance. Given the limited resources and the greater power held by parents of privilege, won't any attempt to meet every student's unique needs result in public schools always doing more to meet the unique needs of children of privileged parents than they do to meet the unique needs of other students? Question 2 is, isn't a focus only on what each student needs likely to result in an underestimation of what some students need and an academic program that doesn't offer these students a promising future? So those are the two questions to think through. The protocol I'd like to provide is everybody take 5 minutes or so to jot down some notes, kind of align your thinking. And then the protocol I'd like to follow is we'll start, somebody can start, another person follows, the rest of us will listen. Next person shares their thoughts. They can piggyback on the person before or share something different. We'll go around and then it ends with the person who started. Fair enough? Let's go ahead and take 5 minutes. I'll check back in 5 minutes to see if that's enough time. Yeah.
And you're asking for us to just take a look at these tough questions.
Tough questions. How would you respond to that question?
How would I respond? Okay.
Yeah. How would you respond to that? Just going to do a process check. Did some of you move on to D as well? Okay, still on, are you still on C regular?
I already did both.
Okay. Sam, are you, I didn't move.
I was
to
just
D.
looking at C.
Yeah,
didn't
I was
cover-
just looking at C.
Just process check. No worries.
Okay, so we're doing both C.
When
and
we
D.
finish C, another minute or so to finish C, and then we'll come back and do D afterwards.
Oh,
Yep. Right, are we almost there? Okay, we'll take both questions kind of as a cluster. We'll target your response a minute to a minute and a half. We'll go ahead and just go around the table. Again, you can piggyback on what somebody shared or share something thought that you had. Whoever starts will have the last word, right? So they'll get to have the last reflection of the round, all right? After we've gone all the way around, we'll take a couple minutes to debrief as a group and just talk about what was shared. Who would like to start?
Say that one more time. How does it work?
So we'll say Rahila is going to start. Rahila will share her reflection around those questions for about a minute, minute and a half. Sam will go next. We'll go around the table. When it comes back to Rahila, Rahila will have the last reflection point based on what she's heard. And then we pause and then it's a conversation with all of us afterwards. Okay.
So Raheel is talking about her response to this.
Huh?
And then I would talk about my response to this, or are we discussing?
No, your response.
Oh, and then at the very end, Raheel would get one
Yeah.
chance to, based on what all of us said, just so she gets a fair
And
opportunity to
it
comment on
could
ours.
be that something that Rahila says triggers something that was meaningful for you and adds to your reflection.
Okay.
Right? If it's totally different than what Rahila shared, that's okay too.
So when I read the two questions for stamp C, on the first question, the phrase that struck out to me was privileged parents. And so I both agreed and disagreed with the question because to me, the heart of that question is saying that there's going to be some segment of students that are going to get served first, and maybe only certain segments of students would get served. The question specifically said children of privileged parents. I'm not sure that that would be that was the part that I kind of disagreed with, but I agree. There's finite resources, so we are going to have to pick which students we choose to focus on. And I felt comfortable with that, given that we have finite resources, and as long as it's a focus on academic outcomes and on our values, so that's how we're prioritizing who we choose. The second question, it talked about an underestimation of what the students needed, and I thought about that a bit. Again, to me, it was a little bit about, my assumption is it was trying to get at if there were inherent biases at play when assessing what a student needed. And I think as long as we're cognizant of that, and again, we're focused on academic outcomes and what's going to help us get there, that I felt comfortable with that. And then really my theme is around focusing on academic outcomes, because even when I was thinking about stance D, in the first question about meeting, if we're focused on lower performing students, is that creating an attitude of dependency? Well, to me, when I was thinking about what kind of needs would we be meeting, I thought about accommodations because a student needs, for example, extra time to take a test because maybe they have dyslexia, or maybe they, that's just a very specific example. But again, it's the focus on the academic outcomes, meeting the needs that we are able to determine this is what this student needs. Then I felt okay if that was a dependency. And then even I think on the next question, it's about it was about evenly weighting or having the access for an unlimited length of time. If the student got identified with a need in K and we gave them that accommodation all throughout or met that need, as long as that need was still present, I felt like it was okay. But at the end of the day, we're a K-8 district, so I'm not sure our obligation continues past 8th grade. So I'm going to stop there.
Okay, as I read through these tough questions, I put myself in the position of maybe a public speaker's coming and asking these, or whether it might be someone I run into a grocery store and ask. And also, like Rahila said, or Trustee Posse said, the privileged parents thing is the thing that struck me the most out of this. Many times, privileged parents or children of privileged parents, they may get like extra tutoring, or they may get extra help, or their parents don't have to work 2 jobs, so they spending the evenings with them instead of trying to make money. When I think of equity, and I think it's like the underprivileged children are the ones that need the most support. And if this policy is focused, and stance C, if a board was to take stance C, it'll be looking at those underprivileged children and addressing their needs, where they're the specific ones equity is targeting, to give them that extra boost to match up what those privileged parents would get. And when making decisions on individual children, what their needs are, you always need to go back to the core of the equity statement, which we are developing. And once we develop that, every decision we would make would have to go back to that core statement and say, are the decisions we're making, are they meeting the ideals of that equity statement? One thing early on when I first became a board member, I attended some MIG seminars, and they always said they say focus on student achievement, and they said the highest performing boards spend the majority of their time focused on student achievement and not other issues. So they had some metrics in there. I can't remember what they were. And that was my, that was my mantra as every policy that would come forward, everything, I'd always think, how does this affect student achievement? And as I started working with the equity work, I changed that a bit to how does it affect equitable student achievement? And that's the mantra of like any policy that comes forward. It's like, how does it affect equitable student achievement? So in this first question, I believe that, the privileged children, if they have privileges that are giving them an extra boost, the whole equity is to give the children without that underprivileged, that extra boost. The second question This was an interesting concern that came up. The logic around the concern or the question didn't quite. If someone asked me this question, I'd ask them to dig deeper and elaborate on it. But again, what did I write down in my notes here? Yeah, the whole concept about equity, it's providing an environment so that all children have the opportunity and the motivation to reach equally high outcomes. So it says underestimating some of student needs, and it says a program that doesn't offer students a promising future. I think that's contrary to what equity is all about, is to give everyone a promising future. And by the students who have the most needs, provide the customized solutions to help them achieve that promising future. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. So I guess for me, for these two questions, so I kind of see this, I agree with the previous trustees, Posse and Leinbach, that the whole goal is about student achievement. But in terms of personalized opportunity, the reason why I don't think it's necessarily just a parents of privilege type of thing is because students have different learning styles. They're coming from different places. And we shouldn't always just focus on those who are struggling, but also those that are bored. And so then, there's a whole spectrum of where kids are at and how they learn best. And when you're looking at that, a lot of it is the people around the students, observing them and reflecting on what's going on and being able to provide what they need to thrive. So that piece of it doesn't necessarily have to be just privileged parents if you build it into the systems of the school, right? If there is no process to observe those things and make every attempt to understand where kids are coming from and change things in the classroom, then yes, then it's left to the parents who know how to navigate and how to advocate will get their child what they need. But if you build it as part of the systematic way of how we run our academic programs, then it won't come as a parent of privilege type of thing. Because I kind of see even, the IEP and 504 processes as being very complex. And a lot of the parents don't know how to navigate those things. So it's the ones that have the time to do the research or go to trainings are the ones that are able to get those services for their kids. So if we really want to have personalized opportunity, there's got to be either, advocates that reach out to people or there's some way of touching base with every student and every family. And maybe Youth Truth might help in that aspect, but some proactive way of collecting that input, because a lot of the parents and the students aren't going to speak up. And so we might be missing a lot of those opportunities to provide customized support. And then as far as the second question, I think that actually, brought to my mind that sometimes biases could get in the way. And if you know that certain students have needs, you may decide that they're never going to be able to reach a certain level and change the goals. But if our goal is, maximizing student achievement, all the assessments and standardized tests and things of that nature have different bars that where students demonstrate that achievement and that mastery of content. So if we're always focusing on mastery, then it's not going to potentially dumb down the program, right? Because we're focused on mastery, not creating just something that the students need without the mastery side of it. So that's what I was looking for. I mean, the idea is really to find out what the strengths and passions of the students are and how the modes of learning where they learn best, and being able to put the program in place so that it touches that and thus increases engagement.
So stance C. One of the things that I was looking at both those questions, and what occurred to me is that one of the practices that we have is to not only assess, but reassess our children. And that we have a formal approach to how we do that. Everyone gets the same or similar tests. And those are not only utilizing that qualitative and quantitative data to understand our children, helps us then understand where we need to redirect our resources. I think if you are develop a culture where campaigning for resources is how you get resources, that this is really problematic. But if you have a culture where you're assessing, reassessing, with the hope that you're giving children tools for success, not necessarily, bells and whistles for success, but intellectual tools for them to build success. That would seem to be the goal. And so it sort of depends on what you mean by resources. If the resources are directed at intellectual growth, that makes sense to me. If the resources are directed at, more field trips and time with at different locations that don't necessarily contribute to academic achievement, but feel like a richer experience. I'm reminded of the recent article that we saw in the Daily Journal about school choice and picking schools that give me the experience that I want. So if a school doesn't offer robotics, I'm not going to go to that school. If a school doesn't offer me programming, I'm not going to go to that school. But there was no talk about the intellectual growth that a school might provide and the social emotional growth that a school might provide. And so this speaks to sort of that culture of do it my way, or I don't like the way you're doing it, and pressuring districts to retool their curriculum towards retaining and recruiting children because they're the customer. I feel like we're really trying to help them in a different way than that. I think that the only focusing on their needs can underestimate their academic programs. Well, if you view somebody as static in their needs, I suspect that would be the case, but that can't be part of our culture. Our culture has to be an attempt to move someone forward so that they're at pace or they're above pace. And it makes me think of our English language learners, who our goal is not to keep them English language learners. And what we see as they start to master English, our English language learner population starts to move or become a lower percentage of the population, because now we've given them the tools to not be dependent on that particular track, and now start to move into achievement that reflects their intellectual abilities. So it depends on what your goals are, I guess, and your philosophy is, I guess. And then on stance D,
We're just
we're just doing C?
Just C.
Oh, okay, well, I'm done then.
You're done. Just C.
Oh, I thought we were comparing both. No?
I thought we were doing both, sorry.
That's okay.
Just following Rahila's pattern. Well, so a lot has been said. I don't know that there's a whole lot I can say that's new, but the way that I looked at this was when I read stance D, it made me immediately think of the dashboard that we have. I'm not sure why it did, but that's the first thing I thought about, that this seems to be what we aspire to do right now. right? And that what the dashboard aspires to do, which is why I favored it. I think stance C for me, in looking at the tough questions, I actually kind of respond where you all responded to the privileged parents, that kind of struck you as not right in some way. The word needs actually struck me as not right in some ways because of some of the reasons that Jim mentioned, but also just if you think about the tough question about the second tough question under stance C, I mean, I would have favored something rather than needs, something more like allows students to reach their individual potential. Because I feel like that's really what C is trying to get at, because needs does seem to be sort of, let's say that your need is to be able to score well in math, but maybe more than your need, you want to do robotics, right? So maybe the robotics is not a need, it's a want, and it's helping you get to your potential, which is why I think stance C, it's a little too restrictive. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
I'll share a couple thoughts as well. So when I looked at the first question, the thing that stood out, parents of privilege, of course, kind of stood out to me. But meet every child's unique needs. The thing that came to my mind, I wrote the note advocacy. I wonder who has access to those decision makers, like who's actually the decider of kind of what's happening, and am I always including my diverse groups at the table when I'm establishing what I'm striving towards. The second question, I was okay with needs, but I wanted to know what was my end goal. And I wanted to define that need. If my end goal was academic mastery, then I wanted to call that out and make sure that I'm getting all of my students. If that's the goal is here, I'm getting my students to here. And this is my focus, maybe not here, right? The other thing, actually, as I listened across, I appreciated the idea of resources to build on success. That if we always focused on, the growth mindsets and the thinking behind the perseverance and the grit and whatnot. Do I not get closer to that end goal while lifting everybody up as well?
So I think that on C, I actually really liked the word needs, and it was because it was similar to how there's a reframe around the achievement gap versus the opportunity gap. The fact that it talked about the student needs centered it around our obligation to see that they could live up to their full potential. I also agreed with kind of what Dan was saying around there's a missing point to me here around what the end goal is. So the second question of underestimation really stood out to me because the needs is, if you think about opportunity gap, it is relative to what's a baseline of where people could be. And while there is personalization along that, somebody I think used the word personalized, individualized potential. There we go. And I think that's true, but I think there's also a baseline, right? So there's a minimum and then there's individualization above that. And I think it's really important to hold both truths.
Yeah.
Great. So we've all had a chance to share our response. So group conversation, no parameters. We'll try and keep it to probably 5 minutes or so.
One of the takeaways I had listening to everybody was language. Dan, you started off saying that our agreement on the actual words is important. And it was just interesting because we had a lot of phrases that were very similar, like as some examples I wrote down is I used academic outcomes. I think trustee Linebach and trustee Koo used student achievement. We all had very similar phrases that meant certain things. And then even just the question of needs versus, I think trustee Bopali talked about needs versus framing it as potential. A lot of it is around what is it that is getting at the heart of our intent and how we decide on what the ultimate wording is. So that was just one of my reflections as I was listening to everyone.
I kept thinking about the access issues of parents of privilege, and how sometimes it seems like there's things that parents will do to try to encourage their teacher to pay more attention to their child. Gifts to the classroom, volunteer time, things like that. And some of that, clearly, mostly that comes from a very good place, but you can see how sometimes that might be pressure for a different kind of relationship. And it made me think of not the individuals at a particular site, but like when you have one school within a district that is a clustering of wealth versus other sites, like I think of some of the Oakland schools. And there is definitely clustering of wealth within some of those districts where there's huge disparities from site to site. And how, that group may take a buzzword like equity and push it towards that site because of perceived equality differences, whereas the real equity needs are at some of the other sites that don't cluster around wealth and cluster more around poverty. And that, I think, can be a real challenge in these situations where we start talking about unique needs, because again, our goal is, I feel like our goal is to empower children with the tools that they need for mental growth, and also allow them to maximize their individual achievement. So we always are trying to balance those two things. But the intellectual tools are the biggest gifts that we give them.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what Superintendent DeGuara and CB Bao were saying about the end goal was not clear, because I actually wrote here, yeah, you can underestimate if there's no target, right? So, but I think if there is a common target, say we want to have a certain level of mastery of skills based on what we would say good academic outcomes or student achievement, then I think the needs piece is not about the student wants. It's actually how to meet the needs of kids so that they can reach whatever target we set, right? And so I actually do like the word needs, because it really highlights that every child is different. But I do agree also, though, that the target needs to be set across the district and not school by school, because otherwise, because this doesn't really say anything about how you're going to allocate the resources. It's just the idea that we should be focused on students' unique needs. So then it's up to the governing board and the district administration to figure out how the resources will be allocated in order to meet those unique needs, right? It's not saying it has to be allocated equally. So it's very possible you could allocate the resources differently depending on the school site as well, because it's really about meeting the needs of the students at a particular school and within the school itself. So you can still have a goal of meeting unique needs at a school with high concentration of wealth, for example. But that's going to look very different, right? You wouldn't need some of those community school type of things where you have all these supports for baseline survival type things, but it's more within the classroom, just noticing how the kids interact and what works well for them and customizing the education, which may not cost as much as those wraparound services that you might put at another school.
Yeah, I'll take advantage of that pause there. I know some of us have looked at these, some of us haven't. Even if you have, maybe take another look, because now maybe your perspective has changed again. So let's do the same 5 minutes or so with stance D. Another 30 seconds or so to wrap up your thought. And I'll be looking for somebody different than where he let us start.
Yeah, the first phrase here about heavily weighting school practices for lower performing students. What I think that misses out on is the idea of, this is exactly the idea of the curb cut effect. So that when you raise the tide, the entire school starts to have better overall achievement. And that very much reminds me of a lot of the things that I've seen in Nesbitt along the way, which was a struggling school that we put a lot of resources into. And as the teacher culture and teacher skill set improved, the entire classroom started to thrive. And certainly there's still ongoing attention to children that have special needs. And that's why we have a concentration of some of our special needs resources down there. But as we move all those children forward, the entire community seems to do very, very well. And we saw that in a reflection of their scores over time, to the point where in the lower grades, they had started off not as well as the rest of the district in terms of their state-based scoring. And by this last few years, I think they've been right on par with everyone else in the district. So I guess it sort of is making us take the potential for pointing too much towards a certain group, but at the same time, we see a curb cut effect there.
So I'll go next. I think the question about the first question doesn't heavily weighting school practices and resources in favor of lower performing students create an attitude of dependency within those students. So, I mean, I would say no. And to me, the example of students who are English language learners is probably the best example, where you have students who do need those resources for a period of time. And then when they're able to master English or get to a certain level of mastery, given their grade level, then they are shifted out. So I don't think it creates a attitude of dependency. And I think that's one example, but I think that probably is true for math as well, and other types of I'm sure that's true for speech and language as well. We have those supports. And then I think that the third question, I had to kind of smile because I mean, nothing's for an unlimited amount of time. So
I had the exact same.
Right. I mean, everything has a time limit. And to the point that Trustee Leinbach made earlier in the meeting about SMART, the whole idea of having SMART goals is you have to have a certain duration. Otherwise, the goal is not really able to be measured, right? You have unlimited amount of time, you'll never get to the goal. So I think that's how I reacted to that question.
So up top, I started like analyzing the words. So I like the idea. I actually started before the questions. Like I like the idea of guarantee. I like the idea of well-designed. When I thought about well-designed, that means that we have specific focus on professional development to allow our educators to learn best practices and employ best practices so that we see change in our classrooms. I underline attitude of dependency as well. And I'll just share my notes was OMG. The idea that lower students would become dependent upon others was a little telling to me, a little disturbing. I don't think that would happen. And then unlimited length of time, I agree. It doesn't, nothing's unlimited, but I think at a certain point we have to say, I've given this a chance and it didn't work. It's not, okay, I'm done. I need to course correct and I need to do something different. And having the time to course correct and do that is pretty critical.
The meets or exceeds a common high level, I think really stood out to me, especially as something that was missing before. At the same reaction, to the first question of just finding that very condescending in a way to the suggestion of dependency and, drawing upon my own experience as an English learner student who moved here with no English whatsoever, and very fortunate in that I went to a school that, really provided very hands-on EL resources. And, I didn't need that support after a year and a half. And when I hear stories about people who moved here at the same age I did, who get caught in this reclassification loop, and then they don't have access to high school courses, and then you're not eligible, they don't complete A through G, like it breaks my heart, because it is by sheer luck that I was not one of those students. I think the next two questions around allocation, like shouldn't allocations be weighed evenly and, unlimited length of time, like in a world with unlimited resources, sure. But I think there's this question of, if we believe that there is that students show up to school with different needs because of the resources they're getting outside of the school, then what is our obligation as a public good around how we allocate our limited resources?
When Trustee Howard mentioned about the curb cut, I was thinking about that second question. And just an example that we see right now is during COVID, the offer of the free lunch and breakfast, and it's continued on this year, and that's affecting all students. And so to me, that was just a poignant reminder of that, or example of curb cut effect.
Yeah, I think a lot of good comments have been said. The unlimited length of time, that stood out at me, but I think that's been commented on. Also with some of these, in this particular stance, D, one size fits all kind of methodology doesn't really work. It has to be more focused, especially when it's talking about the lower performing students, in favor of lower performing students. It's like you can't just focus on that and not focus on all students, and students need to be challenged in different ways. I think that's my premise.
Yeah, like Trustee Lineback said, a lot of my comments have been stated already, but I did want to mention that, like, the second one really struck a chord in terms of, shouldn't practices and resource allocations be evenly weighted on what each student needs? But I think, like, in some sense, it kind of struck me as that sounded a little bit more like an equality type of thing, where, everyone should be allocated similar resources. But I think that things cost differently, but depending on the types of needs required, right? And so I think because a lot of the lower performing students have other things going on that require more resources, it just makes sense that you would be spending more resources on those students to make sure that they're meeting the targets that we're setting for student performance and achievement. And then I think the last one also kind of struck a chord, and I kind of agreed with what Superintendent DeGuara had mentioned, that limited time creates an automatic checkpoint to determine whether what we're doing is working or not. Because if we didn't have that checkpoint, one could argue, oh, I put special programs to support the kids, and then that could create the dependency, or it could, basically show that it's not working. But you've already said, oh, well, we've got a program, move on, and you don't ever go back to check to see if it's working. So I think within a limited time frame makes a lot of sense, because it's an automatic checkpoint.
Great, so open conversation for 5 minutes or so.
It is the goal that we are going to choose between one of these, or this is going to inform our
This
statement?
will inform and push us along further. I'll just make one observation. I think as we were sharing stances, I'll compare from C to D. There didn't seem as much to talk about in D. So I sense that people's thoughts around some of the things that were shared in D were more decisive. They weren't kind of on the fence, which makes me wonder, I think, as a collective group, I think we're more towards that personally. Yeah.
I guess my perspective on that is kind of like maybe our current focus is already on D. And so I don't know if that was what Trustee Bapali was kind of getting at, is kind of like the common practices sort of focused on D already. Whereas C is a little bit more, I guess, stretching ourselves, because we're not looking at just lower performing students, but we're really trying to look at all students and whether their needs are being met. And so maybe with limited resources that may become tough to do, but at the same time, some of it is building in those systems and processes where we're constantly checking if students are engaged and they're getting the supports they need. That would actually help all students, not just lower performing students. So if we use lower performing students to drive consistent practices and how we assess how kids are doing, I think we'll actually be able to get to C. And it's not based on who's the loudest, it's based on systematic ways of doing things.
Yeah, so I was just looking at our actual draft statement so far, and it's interesting. I think it actually combines C and D.
I was going to say the same thing. We're more of an amalgam.
Exactly.
Totally, right?
Right. So I mean, it makes me feel very comfortable with the language that we have.
Great. Let's push along. I think we combined this in our reflection. So we've all seen this. Oh my gosh, I need to go to the eye doctor. I think. As I'm looking at, or it's late. This was the administrator feedback that we received. You have seen this. Let me just jump in here so I can see it. I think the one, I'm just going to point it out. I know I said, this was the I like. So this is the easy feedback to take away from bolding. Leader will be able to say it, the simplicity, cultivate and citizenship, active verbs, that this work is happening. Citizenship shows us not just about academics. Message includes psychological need, sense of belonging, removing barriers. They like ostracized. Sidelined was a term is used because it implies that you have no voice and there is no support. Targeting resource based on measured needs. So that was all the good stuff. What can we grow from in our administrators' feedback? I'll double click here. I won't read everything. I'll read some of them. Race, ability, and linguistic status. Why didn't we mention that? How might the intro read as if it was an active voice? We can leave that to the wordsmithers as we go. How does behavior play a role? And then how we use the equity statement, I think that comes later. Thinking big. What's the difference now regarding equity than in the past? I'll just anecdotally say that if we're going through this work, it should make a difference in the way we provide our oversight. Apply to all ages. Does it imply that we should focus on how to on now to get to the future? How will counselors help support the term entitled? I'm looking at Ching Pei. Entitled was the one that really bothered our leaders.
Really bothered them.
Really bothered them. Both times we presented it. And then how can principals take back this work? So a lot of these pieces, the wondering, we'll get to after.
Can I just ask a question about that, though? It's interesting. With the first time I read the statement, that didn't bother me. I think now hearing the feedback, I can understand why the word entitled maybe, created a sense of concern. But I mean, isn't entitled the same as guarantee?
I think if we look them up in the dictionary, we'd see a dim, and I'll look to kind of Ching Pei this. I think we'd see a similar.
I think it's not the precise meaning of the word, it's the connotation that comes with being entitled.
Yeah.
And living in an area
Privilege.
where we have a lot of privilege, and with that comes entitlement in a negative sense, not that the kids deserve. There's no issue with kids deserve the best. We should guarantee it, we should give it, that's our responsibility. What are the other tacit senses that arise from entitled?
Yeah, because often it's used in a kind of negative connotation when you call someone entitled, right?
Yeah.
So,
Like, you expect it from me and I'm gonna sit and wait for you. I expect it of you and I'm gonna sit and wait for it because I'm entitled to. I think is the.
without kind of putting in the work necessarily.
Right.
We could also say deserves.
So what I'm hearing is that it wasn't so much about the meaning of it. It was just that one word.
It's that specific word, it's not the intent of the word, right? Like, it's because it can be read in so many different ways and it is used maybe in popular cultural language a little bit differently than what entitled necessarily means in the Oxford.
I think that problem is easier resolved than if the meaning was, so we can we can go to the thesaurus and what is it, Alt F7 or something?
If I remember right, I think we actually talked about that word too. I don't know if it was a large group or a wordsmithing group. That if we said guaranteed and somebody didn't get there, implications for that, I think was one of our thoughts. So at this point with the equity statement, I don't think it serves our time well to wordsmith, but I think it definitely makes sense to throw out a couple ideas that we think, if there are any, that we think the smaller team that comes together to talk about active and passive voice and those kinds of things should look at. There was one suggestion. I will say that they said, our administrator said, we didn't call out specific groups or specific areas based on our data. I have seen equity statements that go so far as to say, have a couple data points in it as benchmark metrics. The concern with that is then you identify certain groups sometimes, and that has a tendency sometimes maybe to not feel so comfortable because it gets overgeneralized, but that's certainly there too.
Maybe calling out a group can sometimes insert bias against that group.
Yeah. And also, if you call it a specific list, you're always going to miss someone out of that list too.
Yeah, because I think the initial intent of this was to really focus on each and every student. And so this is a broad statement that applies to all of our students. And it kind of goes back to that hybrid stance, C and D, I mean, this is kind of the stance C where we're not calling out specific groups in this statement because this is kind of our target. What we really see as what equity looks like to us. And then it probably is more when it gets to the action plan is where we look at the different data points and what's happening and then make decisions on specific actions to take.
One thought about the calling out specific student groups is if this is bound to a particular time period, then I think it makes more sense to call out specific students. However, our demographic may change year to year, and maybe not every year, but over, let's say, 3 years to the next 3 years. And I would hope that the equity statement would be longer lasting than just a year or two. Also, the other thing I was trying to remember that second to the last bullet, we had some phrase, and I can't remember what the phrase was, but then when you looked it up in one of the articles, it gave us that phrase of those who may be underserved, disregarded, ostracized, et cetera. And it also had some example populations. And at the time when we discussed it, we decided deliberately not to include those. I don't remember all the reasons why, but I know we discussed it and decided not to.
We did.
Any other thoughts?
I like how the healthy is. Any other, so presumably my recommendation would be again, for two people to come together and wordsmith one final time. I'll take it out to another community group this time. Last time we did internal, principals and our administrators. I'll take it. I think it would be appropriate for us to do a community follow-up like we did last year, do part 2 and get feedback from another group of stakeholders. And then hopefully at that point, we'll be ready to include it into our get some input from CSBA on that, from Nicole, and then we'll work that in. Any other areas that you want a subgroup to take a look at the wordsmithing?
Were there any other hot buttons besides entitled?
Were there any other
Hot buttons?
No,
Entitled was the
The
main.
one that, like, as you read it aloud, we got stuck.
Yeah.
We couldn't even finish the sentence.
Wow.
And when we did it, we
We did it twice with them. We did it once in June, and then we did it with our new team again in August, and they were almost incensed that, wait, it's still there. Well, we're doing a second read.
And our second read was to bring our new administrators on board where we were. But they stopped us again and they said, wait, we already gave you feedback about that word. Still worried. Okay. Who would like to join me in tailoring that and finalizing?
I'd like to help out.
Okay. Amy and
I'll volunteer.
Rahila? Great. Right, so in terms of next steps for our next steps, next slide. If you, I have it, sorry, Kristen. Again, sharing with stakeholders, community, PTA, schools, that councils, that group, begin to draft our equity policy, finalize our equity statement so that it can be included. Nicole's recommendation is the equity statement goes in within the equity policy, but we'll do some work with CSBA on that. And then finally adopt that policy. And I shouldn't have stopped there because the next logical step would be to use the policy to guide our decisions. Right? Questions on that?
Can you go back to the diversity or the equity statement real quick? The first bullet point, cultivates mutual respect. I think this is true for us. And it's not really stated here, but it's sort of implied that diversity is valued. And we don't really call it out specifically. I think that belongs under mutual respect somewhere. Maybe that gets at the piece about language a little bit more.
Yeah, it's kind of a good point because a lot of districts, they often have DEI all together, like diversity, equity, and inclusion. But here we've really focused in on the equity. I don't know if we need to mention anything about diversity or inclusion. I mean, we kind of hint at it.
Yeah.
I wonder, so when I think about diversity, sometimes I'm struck by, is diversity, Asian, white, Indian coming together, is that diversity? Or I think that's diversity, generally speaking. But I think we want to encourage our kids to be proud of their culture as well. That's perhaps even an extension of that it's not just us being together and being mixed, but it's actually me having the ability to value my culture as a part of this whole too.
And diversity often, I mean, it goes beyond ethnic groups, genders, and things like that, because again, that's why we call out unique gifts, talents, and strengths, because it's also diversity of thought and, different personalities. It's just recognizing that when you have people who are different from each other coming together, that's where you get the together is better. Right?
Actually, I'm really glad you called that out, because there are studies that have been done on boards. When you have more diversity on boards, when you have more diversity in executive leadership, when you have more diversity in decision-making, you make better decisions and the organization as a whole is more productive. So I think that's a really good missing point.
It's one of the things I value about this particular board a lot, is that we all have different professional backgrounds. Not only do we look different, but we, have intellectual perspectives that are different. And, it's just our best discussions are when all those things are sort of coming to bear and we're all able to express our views. It's just such a great combination of personalities and backgrounds.
Good discussion. Thank you. I appreciate that. I will say I have always appreciated the board's energy to engage in discussion and actually go through protocols and read research and it's good. All right, so that's the equity piece for tonight.
Thank you. That was well facilitated. Because you're saying, we're so gung ho to follow along, but that's because of all the great prep work. It takes a lot of great prep work for everyone to follow along and stay engaged as well.
Thank you. That's it.
So with that, we will not be convening to closed session. So we are ready to adjourn at 9:40. Okay, adjourning at 9:40.
Motion to adjourn.
No, we don't.
Oh, just say, okay.
Yeah, we don't usually motion.
Okay, good.
Very powerful, Dan.
I love it. I love it.
He has the gavel.